Welcome back to Matt's Movie Nights, the show where I recommend movies and we talk about them. And last time we did a sexy Frankenstein triple feature. So let me ask you, how many copies of Flesh for Frankenstein do you think is too many? To be fair, these two are the same release. This is the Vinegar Syndrome release, which includes the movie in 4K along with a bunch of bonus features and the original 3D version, which is the version I watched. This one's an old school British import because this release of Flesh for Frankenstein only came out a couple months ago from Vinegar Syndrome, so this was the only way to have it on Blu-ray before that. I'm not gonna sell this one. I'm probably gonna hold on to it because, I mean, it's a British import, so I don't know how much resale value it really has, A, and B, like, whatever, I'll just keep it. Not that it has anything on it. It has production stills, that's it. But this is the glorious new Vinegar Syndrome version, and I specifically, I held out. I was planning on doing this triple feature in, like, June, July, and then Vinegar Syndrome announced, like, hey, we're gonna do a 4K release of Flesh for Frankenstein, and I'm like, alright, I'll hold out for the Vinegar Syndrome release, and I'm glad I did, because I got to watch it in 3D. Oh, it's like my hand is really in front of my face. So, a problem I have with the black and blue 3D glasses is I think they kind of work better for like a black and white movie because it kind of washes out all the colors. That does actually work for Flesh for Frankenstein, though. It's a very dreary movie, and it kind of it makes Frankenstein look gray, which is a good look for him. Udo Kier, it makes Udo Kier look gray, which is a good look for him. Flesh for Frankenstein is a film from Paul Morrissey about Dr. Frankenstein creating, resurrecting a woman from the dead and then trying to stitch together the perfect man for her so that they can have children and breed a brand new race created by Dr. Frankenstein, and he would be god of this new world. Meanwhile, his wife, who is also his sister, has taken up a lover of what's the male version of a mistress? I don't know, a gentleman fuck buddy. So she's having sex with him behind Dr. Frankenstein's back, and Dr. Frankenstein doesn't actually seem to care because it gets her off his back while he's trying to create a new race of people. So they definitely lean into some like Nazi imagery with Dr. Frankenstein. Not the only time that's been done. Not the only movie that uses that uses Frankenstein as metaphor for the Nazis. Ken Russell, Litztomania, also does that. It makes sense to me. I get the connection. It is probably the oddest adaptation of Frankenstein. There's not really a Frankenstein monster running around killing people. It's mostly a film about Dr. Frankenstein, which, to be fair, is also true of a lot of the Hammer horror movies. We're about to talk about one, but yeah, most adaptations of Frankenstein have a monster running around killing people, and in this, it's really like, it's very Dr. Frankenstein-centric. The monster doesn't do a whole lot. And God, this movie is just like buck wild. Just stuff just keeps happening. It's totally insane, totally unpredictable. This film was like, it's sort of made on the fly. There was this Italian producer who told Paul Morrissey, like, hey, we want to finance a film for you. What have you got? And his agent, I think his agent said, like, oh, well, we can do, like, a horror movie. We'll do Frankenstein. And Paul Morrissey's like, yeah, okay, Frankenstein. And he, like, improvised the plot right on the spot, and then basically, like, figured out what the movie was while he was making it. And you can kind of tell. The same can be said for this film's sister film, Blood for Dracula. And you can kind of tell with that film as well. And it's sort of this odd dual-sided coin where, like, Flesh for Frankenstein, it's this really, like, in-the-moment movie. It's real, like, chaotic, but it's like driving at this very specific underlying emotion, and it just works great. It's a movie that runs like purely on emotion, whereas Blood for Dracula, you can tell they came up with one joke and then didn't really think any more about it. They're like, okay, here's the joke of Blood for Dracula. It's one joke. The whole movie is just one joke. I don't like Blood for Dracula as much. I'm willing to give it a second chance. I would like to watch it again because of how much I love Flesh for Frankenstein, but Blood for Dracula just is not as interesting to me. This film was alternatively released as Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, much to the chagrin of Paul Morrissey. Andy Warhol had money in the film. He and Paul Morrissey were close back in the day, but he was reportedly on set one day during filming. He had very little to do with the production of this film. To his credit, I do think Andy Warhol is the type of guy who can kind of step back and let Paul Morrissey make Paul Morrissey's film. But Paul Morrissey really hates how much credit Andy Warhol has gotten for this. I watched an interview with him on this Blu-ray here, and he seems really pretentious, honestly. He seems really full of himself. He's talking about how, like, Andy Warhol was too autistic to function. Like, he barely did anything, and then he's going on about, like, oh, I made Andy Warhol famous, and it's like, and like, Andy Warhol's, like, no talent dude, and I'm like, I gotta disagree with you on that one, man. I like me some Andy Warhol. I admit he had nothing to do with this, but yeah, I agree. It shouldn't have been called Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. This is not an Andy Warhol film. This is a Paul Morrissey film. Very much so. On the other hand, I think Andy Warhol's name attached to it probably got more people interested in it, and probably, set up an expectation for people, like, hey, this is what this movie's gonna be like, man. This shit's gonna go off the rails. And it does. It does go off the rails. I love it. Some of the acting in this film is not good, but it also feels totally appropriate for the film, because it feels like it's trying to be sort of a gothic, Hammer horror-esque, Frankenstein movie. And a few cheesy performances feels appropriate. So then when they do the total subversion and people are just like blood and guts flying everywhere and like constant sex and nudity throughout the whole film, it's like, okay, yeah, no, this is not a Hammer horror film. But it feels appropriate. The horror acting feels appropriate. Although Udo Kier in the lead as Dr. Frankenstein, perfect. As is Mrs. Frankenstein, his wife and sister, and his assistant. I forget the assistant's name. Hans? I think his assistant's name is Hans. Might be wrong about that. Someone in this movie is named Hans. No, you know what? I'm thinking of Frankenstein created woman. Someone in this movie is named Hans. No one in this movie is named Hans, so far as I can remember. It is one of those films I think a lot of people maybe don't understand. Like, to me, this is clearly satire. this is a joke. This is a comedy film. And I think a lot of people miss the comedy of this film. I think they take it too seriously. It's a joke. It's a comedy movie. It's a parody. I don't know. I feel that way about a few films, though. I just, like, people just don't get comedy. People don't get when films are comedy, and I'm like, come on, how are you missing this? This is obviously a comedy. I get it if it's not your thing. It is a lot. I get that it's not going to be everyone's thing, which is probably why I like it so much. Like, I am a big fan of films that are not going to be everyone's thing, because it just feels a little more special to me, you know? It feels like a film that was made for me. You know, this is a film that was made with someone like me in mind. This is my type of film. This was, of course, a Video Nasty. You can see I'm wearing my Video Nasty shirt. You might have noticed that I redecorated. I've got my Video Nasties right here on this shelf behind me, along with my Friday the 13th box set. And you can see that there's a gap because there's two Blu-rays that belong right here. There's a space over my television, so I had just sort of a Video Nasty shrine over my television, and then I got this 2-disc set, and I'm like, okay, there's no more room for this over my television, but I've already sort of organized my shelves in an aesthetic way. Right, I've got my MST3K shelf over here, and I've got my bad movie shelf over here, just so they'll be, like, right over my shoulder while I'm recording, so I'm like, yeah, what the hell, I'll put my Video Nasty shelf in the shot, too. Down here I've got my box sets. This is a tiny, tiny fraction of the main part of my collection, but it ends up getting covered up most of the time. Definitely one of the best Video Nasties. Like, if you saw my Video Nasties tier list, I put this in the S tier because this is an amazing movie. Absolutely worth watching. Would I say this is the second? Nah, I think this is probably the third best. I would go Evil Dead, Possession, then Flesh for Frankenstein. I don't know. Just a pure, insane movie. I love it so much. It's everything I want. Flesh for Frankenstein. We dare you to see it. After that, we watched Frank Henenlotter's Frankenhooker, the story of a mad scientist who's like been working with, reanimating brains and stuff. Whose fiance gets ground up by a remote-controlled lawnmower. But he saves her head, and he's done all these calculations on how to bring her back to life, but he needs body parts desperately and quickly, and so he develops this, like, supercrack that makes you explode after you smoke it, and then he invites over a bunch of hookers, and they get into the supercrack, and they all blow up, and so he just sort of takes all of the pieces from them and stitches them together and reanimates his dead bride. Which, of course, at first kind of backfires because she's a little mixed up. It's not exclusively her brain. She keeps saying the things that all of the hookers that he bought were saying to him before they blew up. So, a trashy movie. A movie not made in good taste. But you know what? An inventive, fun, creative movie. Really enjoyable, really funny, really silly. It's a film. This came out in 1990, and that's probably, like, exactly when this movie had to have come out. Like, late 80s, early 90s. Any earlier, it'd have been too raunchy, too violent, too taboo. Any later, and you're dipping into, like, politically incorrect territory. This is, of course, from Frank Henenlotter, the director of Basket Case, which I've shown previously, as well as Brain Damage, which I love. It's the only one of his, like, big three films I haven't shown yet. And it's my favorite of his work, actually. So, yeah, that one's coming. Eventually, we're going to have to talk about Brain Damage, because Brain Damage, I think, is actually brilliant. This, Basket Case, they're fun. They're fun movies, but they're not that smart. You know, clearly, it's a movie called Frankenhooker. You kind of get exactly what it says on the tin. I bought this Blu-ray from a DVD resale shop near me, and it includes an Amazon gift receipt. I won't show it because it has the person's first and last name. It says, "Saw this and thought of you. Happy Halloween, Chris and Lisa." So, Chris and Lisa, if you're watching, whoever you bought Frankenhooker for sold it, and I bought it. So, this is my Frankenhooker now. Apparently, Bill Murray loves this movie. The quote on the front here: "If you only see one movie this year, it should be Frankenhooker," from Bill Murray of Ghostbusters. See, this was apparently like one of Bill Murray's favorite movies. This movie reminds me a lot of Bride of Reanimator. It's very Reanimator-esque in general. The main character's name is Jeffrey, and I almost wonder if that isn't a direct reference to Jeffrey Combs of Reanimator. But this came out like a year after Bride of Reanimator, and I could see those two being like a double feature together, because they've got a lot going on plot-wise, and they've also got a lot going on aesthetically, with like these weird body part amalgamations attacking people. That doesn't happen till the end of this movie, but it's there. It reminds me of the end of Toy Story, actually. I doubt Toy Story took inspiration from Frankenhooker. I think more likely Toy Story took inspiration from Freaks, and maybe this also takes inspiration from Freaks, but it's got a very Toy Story ending to it. Maybe I should have. I mean, I guess I haven't shown Reanimator 1 yet, but maybe Bride of Reanimator should have been the third movie in this series. We'll do another sexy Frankenstein triple feature someday. That seems appropriate. There's a point in this movie where he's assembling all the pieces for his girlfriend, and he just has like a pile of tits that have been blown off of the women, and he picks up 2 tits, and then later Frankenhooker takes her top off, and it's clearly not the same tits. In fact, there's no like even like scars around them. It seems like he got like a full correct torso for her. Like the arms are clearly several different pieces, the head is a different piece, but it looks like he just has one whole torso. So I don't know why he was getting the individual specific tits. It's like, it seemed like he has a full torso already. I don't know, odd nitpick, but Frankenhooker's tits are clearly not the same tits he gave her. The only real problem I have with this movie is I feel like the Frankenhooker antics don't start until way too late into the film. Like him killing all the hookers and using their body parts, putting them together and making his own woman, that's like that's like an hour of the film's runtime, and then we get into Frankenhooker, and it's like, I think I'd have liked it if we'd gotten into Frankenhooker just a little faster. I would have liked just a little faster into that Frankenhooker story. Yeah, Frankenhooker. I really enjoyed it. It's exactly what you're expecting. Like, if you are not immediately sold on Frank Henenlotter's Frankenhooker, don't watch it. Like, it is exactly what you think it is. And that's what makes it wonderful to me, because I expected it to be pure fucking insanity, and it is. It's pure fucking insanity, and I love it. Alright, here's the big question. Which one is the weirder trans allegory? Frankenhooker or Frankenstein created woman? Because both have men getting stuck in women's bodies because of Frankenstein experiments, so Frankenstein Created Woman, the next movie in the Hammer horror series. We've covered all the ones up to this one. Maybe I'm a little conflicted on having it in my sexy Frankenstein triple feature. Because to be fair, in this film, the monster, so to speak, is a hot woman who seduces men and then kills them, which very much goes along with Frankenhooker. But, there's not really any nudity. This is a movie from the 60s. From Britain in the 60s. It's a Hammer horror film. There's no nudity, of course, although they do pull the old Hammer horror trick of hiring the bustiest actor they can and then putting her in this outfit that, like, barely covers her, so you can, like, kind of maybe see some of her nipple in one scene, but not really, because, it's a super conservative British, not studio, but like the British film industry in the 60s was not going to let you get away with naked women in this movie. So it does kind of stand apart from Frankenhooker and Flesh for Frankenstein in that sense. Maybe I should have just gone with Rocky Horror Picture Show. But whatever, it is still about Frankenstein and a sexy woman and seducing men to kill them. For you see, in this film, Frankenstein discovers a way to, like, trap a person's soul in, like, an electromagnetic field after they die. So when his assistant is framed for murder, he's framed for murder, but because his father was also a murderer, he's found guilty and he's put to death. But Frankenstein, like, captures his soul, and right after this, the girl that his assistant was in love with kills herself. She jumps in a river and drowns. So he puts the boy's soul in the girl's body. So it's a weird Frankenstein meets Romeo and Juliet. Because, the lovers kill themselves. Well, one lover dies, the other lover kills themselves, and he brings them back together as one. The body of the girl, the soul of the man. And then, of course, she goes and gets revenge on the guys who framed her boyfriend / also him for she goes out and murders them. She goes out and gets revenge on the guys who framed them. Fucking gender, how does it work? It gets very like Spider-Man, like Sam Raimi Spider-Man-esque, because she like goes and digs up the head of the boy and then is like, he's talking to her. He's the one telling her to kill these guys. And somehow they hear him speak before she kills them. Like, she'll have seduced one of the guys who framed him, and then they'll hear the voice of the dead guy being like, Christina, kill him, Christina. And it's like, how are they hearing that, though? It makes sense that she can hear it. She has him inside her. How can they hear him? This is the best Hammer horror Frankenstein movie since the first one. I didn't really like the second or third one that much, but this one's interesting. This one's like, it's a weird concept. Definitely playing around with the idea of Frankenstein a little here. He's not just stitching people together and reanimating their corpses. Now he's trying to, like, capture the human soul and put the human soul back into someone's body after death. And honestly, doesn't seem that much wrong with his plan, other than putting the wrong soul in the wrong body. I think if he just put someone else's soul back into their normal body, he would have been fine. Reminds me a little of the Asphyx. The Asphyx also did that. And it's also like a British horror movie. It feels so Hammer horror-esque. I am shocked the Asphyx was not Hammer horror. I'll have to show the Asphyx. That's a good one. I like the Asphyx. Yeah, I really appreciate how this plays around with the formula. It's not your typical Frankenstein movie. It didn't even have to be a Frankenstein movie. I think you could have put like any generic mad scientist in here, and this movie still makes sense. But it works in the context of the larger Hammer horror Frankenstein series. I'm glad Frankenstein's still out there hitting his stride. Peter Cushing, of course, and directed by Terrence Fisher, who's directed all these Hammer horror movies. So he's like jutting ahead with so many of these movies. I don't know how many more Hammer Frankenstein movies we're gonna watch. Maybe one. I think we're gonna watch like the one after this. So I think after this it's Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, right? We'll watch Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. After that, I don't know. Yeah, so Frankenstein Created Woman. One of the better installments in Hammer Horror's Frankenstein series. I enjoyed it well enough. It's a little simple. I mean, it's over like super quick. Like it's over like that. But I enjoyed it. It's a fun movie. I recommend it. So last week I asked who the hottest monster was. If we're going for like old school classic monsters, I'm gonna have to say Dracula. Although there's a variety of vampires I think probably fit that role better. The Lost Boys, they had a look going. I like their aesthetic. There's a lot of really hot vampires out there. That's all I'm saying. John Cleveland steps in with a couple. Hottest monster is Julie from Return of the Living Dead 3, Irina Dubrovana from Cat People, the Angry Princess from 13 Ghosts, and Syl from Species. Take your pick. The only one of those movies I've seen is Cat People, actually. Good pick. Although, her thing in that movie is like, she's fully human, and then she can just go like fully cat, right? There's no in between there. There's no point where she's like kind of a cat, kind of a person. I don't know how much that one would count. Other three, not familiar with, but I'll take your word for it. John August said the alien queen from Aliens. That's all we're going to say about that. Alright, so before we get into tonight's picks, I'm going to explain a concept to you. It's something I call the Alan Quarterman effect. Okay? That's when one movie comes out that takes pretty heavy inspiration from some older intellectual property, right? And so this new movie clearly heavily inspired by some old IP, and then after the new movie comes out and gets super popular, the old IP gets rebooted to cash in on the thing that was inspired by it. Named, of course, after the Alan Quarterman series. There were a series of Alan Quarterman like serials back in the day, a series of pulp novels, and of course the movie King Solomon's Mines, and that was all very clearly influential on George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. After Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, all of a sudden there were new Alan Quarterman movies cashing in on Indiana Jones, the thing inspired by Alan Quarterman. So my question, of course, is what's your favorite example of that? Because tonight we're looking at what's probably my favorite example of that. The 1980 film Flash Gordon. It's we're just doing sort of a grab bag sci-fi triple feature. I had a couple sci-fi films I wanted to throw in before the end of the year. And Flash Gordon just seemed like an appropriate one to stick in with these other two. I say Flash Gordon as an example of the Alan Quarterman. You know what? I'll explain it next time. Tune in next time to hear me explain why Flash Gordon is an example of the Alan Quarterman effect. After that, we're gonna watch The Day the Earth Stood Still, the old one from the 50s. And then, just to, like, fully round out our cast of Universal monsters, we're gonna watch H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man. So that's our fun sci-fi triple feature for next time. Until then, I'm Matt. Have a nice day.